Hello, my name is Jon Bernard. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in North Reading. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Inside NRPS. My guest today is Ms. Cynthia Conant, the Director of Pupil Personnel Services for the North Reading Public Schools. Cynthia, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
So Cynthia, welcome. I think it might be helpful and kind of interesting for people to just hear a little bit about you. You're new to North Reading, the North Reading Public Schools, but not new to the field of education. So maybe it would be a nice opportunity for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career in education.
Sure. So I started in education back in 2002 at the Dr. Franklin Perkins School. There I worked in both their residential and their day treatment program. I worked as a program clinician. So I was working with families and students who had significant disabilities and weren't able to be educated within the public school setting. That opportunity really gave me a chance to develop my clinical skills and working with families and working with students. And that was all within the context of the private day placement. Then I became really interested in public education, and so I pursued my master's degree. And from Perkins, I transitioned to Ashland Public Schools, where I was a guidance counselor for 4 years. And that was a great opportunity to see the public side of education and really have an opportunity to work with teachers and also see how administration functioned. And at that time, I was working pretty closely with the assistant principal on different cases. And she had given me a little feedback and asked if I would ever be interested in pursuing a career in administration. And at that time, I still, was still kind of getting my feet wet and figuring things out. But that kind of put the bug in my ear a little bit. And I loved my position as a guidance counselor, but then it got to the point that I felt like I had really this clinical skill set that I developed at Franklin Perkins School, and I wasn't really getting to use that in my role as a guidance counselor. So I wanted something maybe in between, not back in the private day and maybe not public, but something right in the middle. So that's when I transitioned to Flat Collaborative. And in that capacity, I was the 45-day program director, and I worked with multiple sending school districts who were struggling with students. So they would come into the program and we would do testing. And my job, my primary function, was to figure out what is the student's least restrictive environment and what did that need to look like. So then I would work with school districts around programming needs for the students and what programs would need to look like for them to successfully transition back into the public school setting. So while I was at FLAC and in that capacity, it was starting to become clear to me that I really wanted to be working as a special education administrator. And the opportunity presented itself with the Assistant Director of Special Education position through Fitchburg Public Schools. And where I had already been working with Fitchburg through FLAC, Fitchburg was a sending district to FLAC. I had a lot of relationships with people there. I knew the director at that time, and she was somebody that I very much admired, and I respected her leadership style. So I felt like this would be a good match. This would be an opportunity for me to learn how to become a director under somebody that I very much admired. I appreciated the way that she made decisions. I felt like she was very transparent, and that's really what I was interested in doing. So I was in Fitchburg as an assistant sped director for 3 years, and then the opportunity presented itself for North Reading. And I went through the process, and here I am sitting with you today.
Well, I must say, and thank you for all of that, I must say that, for the community's benefit, that since you've come to work in North Reading this past July, it has been, I think, by all accounts, a very good and smooth transition, and you've really done a nice job, I think, bringing your talents to North Reading. We've, I think, developed a nice working relationship, and I know others speak very highly of the work that you're doing, and it's a difficult and challenging job. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about some of the daily experiences that someone as a Director of Pupil Personnel Services has.
Sure.
But, I think also for the community that the town of North Reading had for 2 years an interim Director of Pupil Personnel Services. The school department, and I think this was a good thing, certainly now that you're in the position, it was definitely a good thing. We had gone through a couple of searches to try and find someone to fill the position when it was available after a retirement of Christine Danju, who had been a long time Director of Pupil Personnel Services in the town. But the school department had decided that it would work with an interim, which was a good situation for us for 2 years, but nonetheless it was an interim situation.
Sure.
And we made the decision, and I think it was the right decision, that we would rather wait and continue to do a thorough search to try to find a person with a good experience and a good fit, a good match, if you will, for North Reading. And certainly I think that we have been very successful in that. So it's been wonderful having you, and you're doing a very nice job. So
thank you. I
just for a little,
appreciate that.
of course. And so
Yeah.
just a little history for the community about how it ended up that you are here in North Reading. So Cynthia, maybe again, you know, the kind of the overarching purpose of this show is to expose the community of North Reading to some of the inner workings of the school department. You know, I would venture to guess that a lot of people, maybe most people, may not fully understand what is the Department of Pupil Personnel Services.
Sure.
What does the director do? Could you
Sure.
talk a little bit about, you know, in sort of a summary way, I guess, what are the kind of the chief responsibilities, the
Sure.
people in the departments of which you oversee?
Sure. Maybe it might help if I give you the framework for the pupil personnel office
That would be
in
great.
terms of sort of what we oversee and what falls within our purview.
Please.
So the pupil personnel department oversees special education and related services being speech and language, OT, PT services, guidance counseling services, 504 plans, nursing and health services, as well as services related to homeless students. And we oversee that scope of service for students in grades pre-K to 12. So for me, as the director, the way our department is structured, there's myself, I have a senior accountant, we have a clerk in the department, and we have 2 administrative positions, which are coordinators of special education, one at the elementary and one at the secondary level. We also have a secondary team chairperson, and at the building level, we have student support specialists who function as their special education teachers, but they take on sort of a leadership role. So they communicate with the principal and with myself around any issues that might be coming up, problems, questions, concerns. So that's sort of the structure, the infrastructure of the special ed side of our department.
Mm-hmm.
We also have, as I said, nursing and health services. We're fortunate that we have a nurse at every level in the district, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
And my role as director really focuses on, I'm constantly trying to develop and support an infrastructure in all the different domains that we oversee. So for me, it's really important that I'm meeting regularly with the people in the special education department, the nursing and health services, our guidance counselors, our school psychologists. My goal is to hold meetings every 6 weeks with everybody from these departments, and that really gives me an opportunity to make sure people have what they need to do their job. It keeps me up to speed on any issues or concerns that might be happening, and I feel as if we're in a position to be more proactive as issues do arise because we're meeting regularly and we can sort of head off any issues that might be coming our way and identify needs. The other aspects of my job, I meet with Michael Connolly regularly to look at budgetary.
Michael Connolly being the Director of Finance, Finance and
thank you.
Operations. Yeah.
Yes. We have our central office team meetings, which would be yourself, myself, Dr. Daly, and Michael Connolly, the Director of Finance. I also attend special education director meetings through our collaboratives through SEAM and NEC.
Mm-hmm.
I also attend regional nursing meetings so that I'm up to speed on what's happening, you know, in terms of the nursing and health services piece. As you know, this year the district went through the coordinated program review.
Yes.
So a big part of my work this year has been following through on the corrective action pieces that have needed to be done.
And for someone who may not understand
Sure.
or know what the coordinated program review is,
Sure.
could you just talk very briefly about what
Sure.
because it's a
Sure, yeah.
significant piece of
Sure,
work that
yeah.
is under your responsibility. I think it would be
Absolutely.
interesting for people to know a little bit more about
Yeah.
it.
So the coordinated program review is the process by which the Department of Ed comes in and looks at our policies, our protocols around special education, and also civil rights and English language learners. They review files that we have, they interview staff to make sure that everything that we're doing is in compliance. So after you go through the process, they write up their findings, and through their findings, they indicate to you which areas need to be corrected. So you might have some areas that you're in partial compliance, not in compliance at all, or some areas where the district is fully compliant, which means you don't have to do any further action.
And in your experience, how did North Reading fare in its most recent review?
I was very impressed with how North Reading came out on this most recent coordinated program review, especially in thinking about the context of the district and sort of the changes that have taken place. Certainly you mentioned having an interim director. That would be something that could impact a coordinated program review. In thinking about that, I think that the district did really well. I think we came out pretty well.
You mentioned we had a lot of change. We had the
Yeah.
interim Pupil Personnel
Yes.
Services Director. The two coordinated positions that you
Correct.
mentioned were new people.
Right.
We had a change in superintendent,
Right.
which consequently led to a change in high school
Sure.
principal. A lot of administrative level changes
Yeah.
that could have had more of an
Exactly.
impact maybe
Right.
than they did.
Right. And I think that speaks to the work that the teachers and everybody, at the student level, that speaks to all their hard work, their consistency
Right.
in following through with protocols and procedures in light of all the changes. So I think that's really a credit to the staff.
You alluded to something in part of that presentation that I just want to go back to a little bit, and it's around the kind of the organizational chart, if you will, of the school district. Cynthia had mentioned about central office team meetings. Cynthia, as the Director of Pupil Personnel Services, is one of the four central office administrators. Myself, as the superintendent, Dr. Daly, our assistant superintendent, the Director of Finance and Operations, Michael Connolly, and the Director of Pupil Personnel Services, and Cynthia. So kind of, as I said, from an organizational chart or flow, we are essentially the district leaders of the district and of the school district. And as you outline the responsibilities for your job, I think anybody that is watching this show and listening to you would I think probably have a bit of a wow reaction that it's a lot. It encompasses.
Sure.
We kind of have the superintendent overseeing the district as a whole. The assistant superintendent is largely the curriculum instruction assessment person.
Sure.
Finance director oversees kind of the budget, transportation, food services and such, and then really you have the Pupil Personnel Services director that kind of has everything else. So it's
yes.
the operations of the
Right.
school. So it is a big and responsible job
Sure.
that you have. I think I'd like to know and ask you about, and for the community's benefit. So you've been in North Reading now for 6 or 7 months, say.
Yeah.
What has been maybe what has been most eye-opening to you? What have you, since you've been here now and you got the lay of the land a little bit? What do you go home at night and think to yourself, wow, that was maybe something I didn't realize was going on in North Reading? And hopefully it's something good.
It is, yeah. I have to say, and this was something that struck me right away, very early on, and especially in the position that I stepped into as PPS director and looking at the special education side of things. The principals in this district are so committed to educating students within their buildings and will really go to all extents to maintain them within their school. That struck me very early on and continues to impress me every single day. And the ideas that they come up with to, think creatively and think outside of the box. They don't give up on students. And there's very much, I feel that throughout the course of the whole district, from principals to teachers, these are our students.
Right.
And that comes through day in and day out. It comes across in meetings, it comes across if I get a phone call from a principal or somebody asking me to come and do an observation, and I might go and then I see things at that level and I see
Right.
all the good work that they're doing, and they think outside the box and they're creative and flexible. And it's really striking, and that came through to me right away.
That's nice to hear. It doesn't surprise me,
Yeah.
but it still is nice to hear that that's one of the things that you have regarded, so highly in the time that
Absolutely.
you've been here. I think I would certainly echo that from
Yeah.
my experience. I've worked in North Reading a long time now, over 13 years, and I think when I think about where the school district was in 2003 and where we are today, in the services that we provide to families, I'll say, to students, but certainly to families, to educate all children of this town in our school district, and the lengths we've gone to
Yes.
ensure that, because I think you would agree, philosophically, we believe very strongly that a student educated in the school district in which they live is
Right.
really the ultimate goal. It's nice to
Absolutely.
know that students can, that they're in school with the student who lives down the street from them, and
Right,
those relationships. You're not traveling to somewhere else. Certainly for those children that require maybe a more specialized service, and that is the appropriate thing. But we're talking largely that. To know that we're able to kind of build that capacity in our schools. It takes,
Absolutely.
we have such committed principals, as you said. Really, everyone. We have wonderful teachers,
Yes.
and I think about what I see on a near daily basis, just going around to schools at the elementary level, the middle school, and the high school. And one of the probably the greatest rewards that I've experienced in the last year and a half or so since being the superintendent is that is at the elementary level. It was a part of my career that I had so little exposure to. I had really worked, 27, 28 years at the high school level, and but to see what goes on in an elementary school, and really, it's groundbreaking. I mean, that's where children start their education,
Absolutely.
obviously, and to just know what goes on there to engage students at the level that they do of all abilities, and
Absolutely.
those students that are particularly challenged, boy, they really. They're so fortunate to have, I think, the people that they do have around them to work with them, to educate them.
I would agree.
What kind of similarly along that same line, Cynthia, but maybe just to offer a little, so that's kind of what you see as having been, maybe the most rewarding for you, the most eye-opening. What do you feel as the Director of Pupil Personnel Services? I think I might know the answer to this question, but maybe not. is kind of the greatest challenge that you face in your
Sure.
work?
I think my answer is probably similar to most administrators working in education, and it's about resources. And
I thought you might say that.
yeah. Just I think we're always trying to maximize resources and have the most impact with the resources that we have, and that can be very challenging at times. Sort of along the same lines as that is, there are times that you have to make very difficult decisions, and you don't always have the ability to explain your rationale for why or how due to confidentiality or many other factors.
Sure.
And that can be a challenge.
Right,
And I
right.
think those two pieces together would be what I would say are the most
I-
challenging.
We didn't speak about this before the interview, but I expected that you might say that it's resources, and I think that's probably one of the things that confronts me in my role is the greatest challenge, is trying to balance the community's ability to
Sure.
support and being so respectful of that.
Right.
And on the other side, you have all of the things you want to do as a school district for all students, and
Right.
but there's that middle ground that you just seem to almost constantly, near
Yes.
daily, working on to try to achieve the healthy balance, and it is a challenge in North Reading. It's again, you've been here a short time. I think you would recognize this, and I've been here many years now. I think this community is just so wonderfully supportive of education,
Absolutely.
and it's beyond the new middle high school, which
Right.
is certainly a wonderful showpiece for this community, but it's more than just the building, it's more than just the school. While as important as that is and as necessary as it is to have good learning environments from a kind of a physical, structural viewpoint, it's really the people inside and all of the work that you want to do, and we see good work, and it's just wanting to kind of continue that and elevate that sometimes does pose the greatest challenge. Well, Cynthia, I think for you, if there was, this is an opportunity, kind of a public opportunity, if there was a message that you wanted to get out to the community that you maybe sometimes struggle with, how do I get this word? How do I spread this word? Is there something you'd want to kind of offer to the community? I don't mean to put you on the spot,
Sure,
maybe, but
yeah.
this is an opportunity for us to have an audience, so to speak.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I think, just that I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be here, and my experience so far has been wonderful. And when I talk about my experience, that includes the experiences I've had with parents, with families, with teachers, with staff, administrators. It's really been just wonderful, and I feel as though I made a good decision
Good.
coming here.
yeah, I think we did too. It's been a nice match.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there something that's kind of, maybe, I'll say either a budding initiative or something that you maybe see in the near future as an initiative or a goal that you want to undertake to bring to North Reading that is maybe kind of percolating in your mind that you could speak about?
I think, and this is probably similar to most districts, I would say too, is I'm always thinking about how we can better support the social emotional needs of students. And for me, having a clinical background, as I spoke about at the start of this,
Right.
I have a pretty clear vision in mind in terms of, how I would like to see that unfold, and some goals that I have around that in terms of, really utilizing systems and programs that reach all students and then build from there, so that we're reaching all students, but we're also within that same sort of programming able to capture the needs of some of our higher, our more needy students. I think that is an issue that most districts are facing right now in terms of how to effectively support and program for our students with those needs. So I think that's really, when I think about what's percolating,
Right,
and
right.
that's really kind of at the forefront for me. And as I finish out my first year, this is a good time for me because I'm coming to the end of the first year, so I have a good sense of kind of the structure, the foundation of what we have to work with, and what we need to now take the next step.
Right, right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely on target with the whole subject of social emotional needs of students. That's actually a theme for my professional organization, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. Our theme of professional development this year has been dedicated to meeting the social emotional needs of all students.
Sure.
And we've had a number of professional development activities going back to last July with our summer conference, and that's continued through this year, and will culminate with another year retreat in July, kind of capstoning the year, if you will. But that is an area of great I would say great need, great challenge. We essentially, what that is, I mean, you certainly are more attuned to it than I am, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really, I think in kind of a summary way, it's really about creating environments in schools that support children for them to be able to learn at their greatest levels. And it's about
Absolutely.
addressing those kind of complicating factors that arise
Absolutely.
in lots of young people.
Absolutely.
And to try to address them best so that they can kind of flourish and become, the productive, thriving young people that we want them to be, and ultimately learn at the highest level. And it's a challenge.
Absolutely.
I say it a lot. I think, I'm coming up on 30 years now working in public education, and I think it's tough to be a kid today. There's a lot of things competing. There's a lot of, I think that the expectations are constantly ratcheting up. And I think unfortunately, I think sometimes we find young people being confronted with I'll call them the sort of societal ills, the things that go on in the world around them that confuse them or cause them to question, and I think it's different. It's different, and I think it's different. It's been different in a short period of time. It did,
Right.
where we were 10 years ago to where we are today. I think those challenges that confront young people are significantly different, and schools need to keep up.
Absolutely.
And it's professional development, it's resources, and it's just the one thing I would be very quick to say. I think in North Reading, my experience is that there's such a great willingness to do that.
Absolutely.
There's a great willingness to support that, but at the same time, we sometimes find ourselves, all wanting to do more and more and more,
Right.
but we have to find that healthy balance.
Right.
Cynthia, you mentioned a phrase that is very common, I think, in the work that you do. It's common, I think, specifically in the special education domain of the work that you
Sure.
do, the least restrictive environment. What
Sure.
does that mean?
So the least restrictive environment refers to the environment in which a student can be in where they can make effective progress. So when we talk about special education, we're talking about a continuum of services. And that continuum goes from full inclusion all the way to like a Dr. Franklin Perkins school. We have full inclusion, we have partial inclusion, which means students are with the general education environment part of the day and pulled out for their services for another part of the day. We have substantially separate programming, which means a student is within the same classroom for the entire day receiving their instruction and included for maybe specials, lunch, morning meeting. So in special education, you're constantly looking at how to keep the student in the least restrictive environment where they can be amongst their peers in the general education environment, but able to make effective progress. So for teams, for special education teams, that's really their charge. They have to say, what does the student need? What are the services that the student needs to make effective progress? And through the development of the IEP, that's what then determines the placement and decides where on that continuum the student can be in their least restrictive environment.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think it's an important
Absolutely.
piece of
Yeah.
information,
Yeah.
because to achieve that least
Right.
restrictive environment for a student is where really the crux of most of what the work is around special
Absolutely.
education, is to provide that
Absolutely.
opportunity. Special education, guidance, nursing, health and wellness, I'm keeping a list here, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, physical therapy. It's a big job.
Yes.
It's a big job, a hugely responsible one.
Right.
And a critical one in our school district. You've done a very nice job since coming on board in July. We're happy to have you. I thank you for being my guest here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Inside NRPS. Thank you.